to Very Honored Frater BT's Esoterinerd podcast, episode 26, in which I interview Isis the Aquarium. But first, thank you, Honored Sorer FSM, for that lovely recital, the Isis invocation. And thank you, Beethoven. Just lovely. My wife, Honored Sorer FSM, and I recorded that at a professional studio, put it to music, for the Grand Temple of Isis, Mighty Mother, my alma mater, ogdu.org. Our guest tonight, Isis Aquarium, once known as Charlene Peters, was one of the wives of Father Yod, founder of the Source family in the early 70s, based out of the restaurant of the same name on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. You can find Cabo Cantina at the location where the Source restaurant used to be. If none of this sounds familiar, I highly recommend watching the movie called The Source Family Documentary. Isis and I have been friends for about 4 years. She's visited the LA Sanctuary and attended our rituals here, and I was very glad to have her come on the podcast. So, without further ado, let's get to that interview, shall we?
Hi, Edward.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great.
So you had mentioned as a possible direction for the conversation, talking about maybe some parallels between the world that as it is now and maybe the world as it was kind of in the mid to late 60s going on into the 70s, where a lot of people back then were wanting to maybe kind of throw off some of the world that they had been imprinted with. And, back then it seems like it was, a good solid million or two people. But, this time around, it looks like it might be a much higher number. So, yeah, I'm interested in talking about that too, and talking about a little bit about what that was like personally from your point of view.
Sure. It's very interesting because it's kind of like that time frame never left. The 60s and 70s carried a thread that was alive and well, like 40 years later.
Yeah.
And we are in the Renaissance right now, that period, which came very quick. Usually a Renaissance is something doesn't come until much later. And so that was very interesting when I realized that it was having like a second come around. And what happened in the 60s and 70s, the influence that it had on everything in the now, it's like, I think it's very interesting to look at. It kind of was like in that time frame, it was like a door was thrown open and souls heard it. We heard it. Many of us heard it. And we very bravely walked through it. And we wanted to step out of the brainwashing of our parents' generation.
Yeah.
And I feel like what happened was we got heart washed. A lot of people said, people that were in communes were cults and were brainwashed. Well, you do kind of have to wash your brain to be able to get to your heart.
So it's clean.
Yeah. I just felt like we got heart washed.
Your brain looks dirty. You need a good brainwashing. Come on in. Yeah.
So it's just very interesting. It was a journey. It was a evolutionary shift. And we all went through it in different ways. And it was a learning curve for everybody. And there's always the what ifs, could haves. And there was casualties. And sometimes it was messy. But, it was an evolutionary shift. and it was pretty major.
Yeah.
And it was a start of a whole genre of a new age that we're supposed to be dealing with, as you know, the next golden age of Aquarius, which is, you know, morphing into our evolutionary process of more of a spiritual being. So when you do that, the old programs have to go. They don't fit. They won't fit. And I think that's what that whole portal that opened in that time frame was about, and that call went out, and many started that journey.
Yeah.
And that's what we're, you know, in now, is, you know, just fitting into the new programs and letting go of the old. Fitting into the new programs and letting go of the old stuff.
Yeah.
But it was like a perfect storm, Edward. It's like everything was there perfectly at the right time. And that word perfect storm just kind of came up to explain what happened, because so much of what happened and the result of it, it's like it had to have had cosmic help. You know, there was a whole other thing that was happening.
Yeah.
And you mentioned millions. Well, you know, there were, I don't know what the right word is. There was ley lines, there was centers. There was centers where it took hold, where people migrated to because it was safe, like Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You know, well, actually, I think Los Angeles was just about it. San Francisco started, but it became kind of dark with drugs.
Right.
And
there was that one phenomenon in, I believe it was 68 into 69, where there was a lot of different political parties forming and a lot of protesting, but then all the, you know, everybody heard that was where all the hippies were, so it just kind of got overrun by people, and the media was going around saying, "What are you doing here?" And some naked guy saying, "I'm here to shout to the sun." And then Reagan came in, and he was, I guess, governor at the time, and the Hells Angels and the...
Okay, so we're talking about San Francisco, right?
Yeah. It was my friend Gordon was there. He was driving a cab, so he had this sort of first-person viewpoint of he watched Reagan land and get out and flip off all the hippies. So he's hated Reagan, you know, since before that moment, but that moment definitely stayed with him.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it too. And you know, in London was more what they call the term mod hippie. But I think Los Angeles, which is called the City of the Angels, I think that really was a spiritual gateway for the West.
Yeah.
And that's even the East came here, you know, for the merging of the East and the West.
Yeah, there were a lot of yogis and gurus.
Right. And even recently, the Dalai Lama made a very interesting statement. He said, the Western man will be... he said, mankind will be saved by the Western woman. Have you ever heard that?
No, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I know that in that time frame, many thought, and I know that Father Yod, that was one of the things he told us, was that the next spiritual awakening would come from the West. And I think the BOTA, or Paul Foster Case, wrote about that in The Great Seal of the United States.
Yeah, that was a very interesting book. Or in that sense, it kind of already has happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, people, when you start talking like that, people say, so were you in favor of the Iraq war? You know, someone wants to, get you to pin down on, you know, what are you, patriotic? But yeah, no, really, it was a revolution. It was Rosicrucian. It was from the heart. Yes, a lot of the key players had slaves at the time. People, you know, don't want to hear that maybe there could have been some wisdom that came from our ancestors who were so scummy. But
I know.
But I mean, you know, there's a lot to try to look past to see the good. But
I think it was because we were a free country. People weren't afraid of being, you know, hung or assassinated. We had freedom of speech, and freedom of religion, and freedom of expression,
and wanted to keep it.
Wanted to keep
that freedom. Yeah.
You know, I was just checking your site, and you had a thing about Mormonism.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because I'm totally into this whole concept of polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel that's the next thing that's for equality that's going to be put on the agenda, or should be.
As far as legally, for sure. And, and in the minds of kind of the mainstream status quo people will have to kind of get used to the idea like they did, homosexuality. I mean, I witnessed that change from the early 80s when everybody would say...
I know. I was going to say, God, with the gay rights, which I'm totally support, is equal. And then consenting adults can't, have relationships in the way that they want.
Work it out in ways that people have historically. People do.
It's that one little knotted thread that holds it. Like if you're not married, you can have as many partners as you want. You can live with as many partners as you want. But if you get married, then you can't do anything. So I mean, it's very interesting the terms and how Hugh Hefner got away with it, and everybody loved it. But anyhow, I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, it wasn't exactly the angle.
This was something that was close to my life.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
With his first family, with Father Yod having so many wives, and he ended up sealing 14 women as his wives. And there was a process through that where he had many women. And there's a distinction between his women and his wives. Once he sealed who his wives were, that was it. There was no changing it. But and it was just we lived in our own world that we created, and it was we lived by spiritual law over man's law. And that's what I was talking about, man's law, when you have that law and that changes everything.
Yeah.
And so our concepts at the time were, no hurt or harm intended, and we were moving very fast through the spiritual realms because we became a mystery school teaching.
Well, and he was also bestowing teachings that involved tantric practice and intimacy.
Everything became sacred. We didn't have orgies.
Yeah. And part of, from my limited understanding, part of the formulae of passing on of certain lineage in Tantra involves that marriage commitment, that marriage sealing with your partner. So he was basically teaching something that kind of is considered a little edgy even in India, and he was teaching it openly in Hollywood in front of everybody. And I think there were a few people that at that point thought, oh well, this guy's just a pervert. I thought there was something to it.
Well, there's still the debate about it now, even among family members who 40 years later, everybody, was in consent and agreed to it, and we were happy at the time. And, I'm finding out now that a lot of people are looking back at something that happened in a different time frame and trying to make it fit now into this time frame. It's like we were in a different world, and now we're back in this world, and people are trying to make it fit. Well, it just won't.
Yeah.
So it's caused a few people to really spin out, and they're quite negative, and they're thoroughly convinced they were brainwashed, and their life mission is tearing it apart and Father Yod apart, and everything that happened within the family from a point of view of not being done in a spiritual realm. And there is such a difference when you do things in a different mindset. So it's interesting to see how a person, it's just a process, and it's a person path and journey, and everybody's got to just get through it in their own grade level, in their own exams. Everybody has to take their own passing grade with it. So
a couple of thoughts that spin off of those ideas. I'll try to remember both of them. I'm a little stoned. I did a 6-second hit. I did it in honor of... but one thought was, I've seen that a lot in, Golden Dawn circles, Scientology circles. There's all kinds of circles where people, they want to tear it down. Not to say, but on the other hand, what I was getting at, though, is that there's nothing wrong with that unless one happens to be trying to preserve it. So if you happen to be like I used to be one who was actively trying to preserve traditional Golden Dawn. So I was always out there arguing with Thelemites who were, just quoting Crowley saying, oh no, the old rituals are dead. And I was saying, no, they're not, and taking it all personally. But I think that whether you're on the side of tearing it apart or whether you're on the side of preserving it, that transcending it is ultimately much healthier than being obsessed.
I know. But, I've been actively over the last couple of years connecting with past communes like Sunburst Farms and Twin Oaks in Virginia and the Farm, and all these communes that were and a Love Israel family that were all happening at the same time we were. And in reconnecting with them and talking with them in the now, it's like we're all going through the same issues. With trying to figure it out, dissect it, move on, and we're all having the same issues with each other. There's a lot of infighting, and I think that's just until we can get to the point of realizing it doesn't matter.
It is what it is, and it's doing what it's doing, and it did what it did, and it'll do what it'll do, and
And we had an amazing journey. Oh my God, to have been part of all of that, to have even had that experience, it's like, wow. It was what's happening, what we did as part of the forerunners and part of the pioneers were, we were all very well-educated people. If you really look behind people that were dropping out in their stories, and we lived out a lifestyle, and we fast forward our visions to the future. We knew we stepped into the future.
Yeah.
And we started doing dimension jumping back then, and where anything was possible. And we created our own rules. And this generation now is able to just slide into what we had to take on faith. With science proving everything and quantum physics proving everything.
Right.
From our DNA, we create by our words, our thoughts, and just all of the mystery school teachings. But what's interesting in the now is the resurgence of that genre. Like, there are so many events and museum shows right now with titles like Counterculture, where they've taken everything from the 60s and 70s. It's a Bellevue museum outside of Seattle is doing a display of clothes and things from that time frame. And there's something called hippie modernism in the Walker Museum now in Minnesota, a huge museum. And the AVAM Museum in Baltimore just had a whole thing where Father Yoda and the Source were in one part of it called Cosmic Mavericks. I know. So it's like what's happening right now with that thread of the 60s and 70s is very much alive and well and exciting. And it's giving this generation an opportunity to still be a part of it and experience it and enjoy it. It's like we're the old guard and we're still standing. And I don't remember a time where the old guard merged with the new guard like we're doing now. It's kind of like there's no difference. We're all we're all the next generation, no matter how old we are. And people are starting to see each other again as just on a soul level. They're not seeing how old you are, who you are.
Right. Well, yeah, once you start to take reincarnation for granted, then every little kid you're looking at is your former teacher.
Yeah.
that you miss, you know.
I know.
So, I mean, but it's good. It's great because, I mean, so many people look at a little kid and go, "Oh, what a stupid little kid! You haven't seen anything yet." And it's just this really bad, vibey thing that people default to sometimes in you know, kind of in the West. And so I love that. You know, my dad had that where he would start to talk to me like, you know, I think you were a teacher of mine in a former life, and.
Oh, can you imagine growing up like that? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, how lucky were you? Seriously, I know your backstory, and I'm totally blown away at you.
School was confusing because I really had to get used to the way that other people operate.
I know.
But I wanted to mention to you because Janie and I had gone out to Joshua Tree on 11/11/11 and taken a Terrence McKenna heroic dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and I was thinking about the connection actually between the Source family and the Mormons, and kind of in that state, I was imagining Father Yod and all of you guys kind of wandering through the desert and seeing Joshua trees for the first time. And I guess it was like the first time that, well, anybody of note had seen Joshua trees. And so they decided that it reminded them of Joshua praying in the wilderness in the desert with his arms up. And so they named them Joshua trees, and hence the name of the city and everything.
Oh, my God, that's so interesting because that was Jim Bakker's favorite place to go before he even had the Source. And even when he opened the Source before the Source family, that's where he used to go to camp, was Joshua Tree. That was his spiritual retreat.
I love it out there, but it's so crowded. You know, whenever I end up out there, I always want to find a campground that I can be alone at. You know, I just got to go out on a Tuesday or some weird time, or wander away from the campsite far enough. Yeah. Plus, I think there was a connection because he was a bank robber at one point, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't a bank robber.
He wasn't really a bank robber?
He robbed a bank, but that doesn't mean he was a... you know, it's not like that was his profession.
That's funny, the distinction, though. But there was that one time that Joseph Smith had swindled a bunch of people out of some silver he had claimed that he had or something. He had done something, but that doesn't mean that he was necessarily a swindler. It was just that one time.
Look, Jim Bakker was a bad boy. Buddha was a bad boy. If you know, Jesus was a bad boy.
That's true.
Oh my God, he was like the most radical cult leader ever, right?
Right. Or he was really good, depending on how you look at it. And Herod was really bad.
Like, you know, a person's backstory is their evolutionary process. And you always start in your animal consciousness and you work your way up.
That's true. Like, Hermes started out as a thief.
I know. Like we're all supposed to be doing now. You know, we've all got our backstory.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I got mine.
Yeah, and the thing is to, you know, get through that backstory and move on to the front story here that we're all supposed to be doing a little more than we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the heart comes in, the heart being the new mindset, the new brain, because, you know, if you stay in your heart, if you live in your heart and you just be kind, it's a frequency that really protects you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow you to be, it really helps curb badness.
That's true.
You can't live in your heart and be in your heart and be bad like when you live in your mind.
A space where I'm not kind, you know. And you're right. It opens up a portal to badness, and, you know, it can really screw up your day and the day of people around you, you know. So, I mean, yeah, it's very wise.
Well, I think the heart is more of a spiritual genre than the mind is.
Yeah.
And, you know, all those graphics of Jesus and Mary, almost all of them, they're pointing to their heart, right?
Yeah.
There's this big heart, and it's got the threefold shin flame coming out of it, which is the Hebrew letter for spirit, the fire. And I don't know. The heart has 4 chambers like the mind. I think it's actually the balance of the mind and the heart, the love and the wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one or the other. I think you need polarities and everything, but it's that balance of the wisdom, the mind, and the heart.
In Golden Dawn nerd terms, it would be the white dot at the center of the little red rose at the center of the 22 lettered rose of the many colors at the center of the lawman at the breast of the adept standing at the middle of the vault. Or in Tibetan terms, there's I forget the name of it, but it's a little red droplet that sits on your solar plexus, and it contains your immortal soul. Someone told me it has something to do with the liver. That's interesting.
I don't know. That's all getting way...
Sorry, that's the Esoterinerd podcast.
No.
Yeah.
It's on a need-to-know basis right now.
No, but you're right. I it's funny how trying to put things into words, you end up taking away the meaning.
Maybe. Sometimes it's good to know the words.
It helps to communicate across generations.
Yeah, and then that way, as you come across things from all paths, it substantiates, and then you don't have to talk about it. But I think you need to know about it to begin with. So,
and Alan Watts was talking about, in 1959 terms, in the East, when they say I, they point to their heart, to their chest. And here we say, oh, well, where are you? You point to your head.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's an interesting incarnation for sure, and I really feel like I'm probably going to miss this one.
Well, you never know what's coming up, around the corner.
I know. I just feel like a lot of good work's been done this lifetime. I don't think it's been an easy one for me, but I feel like commitments that I made before incarnating. In fact, I know that's when I first met Father Yod. I mean, that was immediately apparent to both of us that we had made commitments this incarnation to work together and to save that legacy, which I think kind of pretty much has been done. So,
yeah, that moment was caught on film, or was it reenacted?
What moment?
When you met.
No, a lot of it was caught on film.
I remember seeing that.
In fact, that's why the archives are so important, because back then people didn't, with the communes and stuff.
Yeah.
Going on, people didn't
document.
Well, no, because they were so in the now.
Yeah.
And just into spirit, and they were like free. And so, yeah, that's why the Source Family book and documentary is done so well in representing a certain fraction of what happened from that time frame.
Yeah.
Because we do have such a huge, valuable archive to share.
Localia. I recommend the book. It's the log of all the saints in Eastern Orthodoxy. Not the Roman Catholic Church, but all the ones, about the schism 1,000 years ago.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So all the ones that were in the democratic, older version of Christianity, but they were, in the caves and stuff like that, spending their whole lives there, praying with the little prayer ropes until they had the vision of the white light and they were able to heal. And so people wrote down the stories of those people. And,
I love caves. I would love to live in a cave.
Yeah.
So awesome. I was going to say something, but I forgot. Oh, regarding names. Mm-hmm. I know many people have asked me for names, and nothing comes forth. I think 2 names have come forth, and that I've been able to give somebody. And I usually just say, name yourself.
I took that to heart as well. When Saori...
Yeah, what are you feeling?
Right.
Why does somebody else have to give you something they see or feel?
Yeah.
What are you feeling?
It was only because he asked me, but in the case of Saori, I was moved to ask her what she felt her name, would be, and she said Waterfall. And then I found out there already had been a waterfall, so I dubbed her Waterfall the Second.
Yeah, Aquarian is not exclusive to the Source family.
Yeah.
We are in the age of Aquarius. We're all Aquarians, and that's exactly why we took the name on.
Yeah.
Was we're all of the same tribe, and we're all entering the Aquarian age. Okay, I don't know. For me, it's there is no source family in the now. It's something that happened 40 years ago.
Interesting. Okay.
But we carry a residue of that thread just like we do in any incarnation. I think we come into all incarnations carrying a residue of our past.
Yeah.
And that was a past incarnation, but it's fresh because we have memory of it.
Yeah.
And so that makes it interesting. But, you know, it's we are all on our own path now. We're not a source family. There's groupings that, you know, like each other. Some of us don't even like each other.
Right.
You know, you get 150 people, 200 people living together in one house and going through a 5 to 6 year period of that intense journey. And there's karma involved. There's drama involved. We didn't all like each other. I mean, I would not have dropped my life to join the Source family for the Source family. I was having a great life. I was totally happy. I wasn't really lacking anything as far as I knew. But it was the soul of Father Yod that I recognized and joined for. So in a lot of ways, I had blinders on for myself, speaking for myself, regarding the family. You know, even though we lived together and we were brothers and sisters, and at the time we enjoyed each other and we loved each other, there was, you know, you come away from that as in any relationship or situation, people having different threads and different commitments with each other and different feelings. And some of them get dropped and some of them we carry on, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, we were in the source closet. We were basically, when I stood up to do the book, it's because I had all the archives and nothing was being done. And nobody wanted to even say that they were in the source. We were totally in the source closet. People were afraid that we were a cult. We would be misunderstood. Father jumped off a cliff. He had 14 wives. Nobody was ready to deal with that from the family.
Yeah.
And some of the family didn't even tell their partners anything about it. So when the book came out, kind of brought a lot of people out of the source closet by force, and then we had to start dealing with it. So it's kind of like when we all leave this body, I know I'm laughing because I know I'm going to look at some of the stuff that's been left, like the archives, the book, the documentary. It's part of history.
Yeah.
And it will survive because my archives are going into a very prestigious archive program at UC Santa Barbara.
Excellent.
So for hundreds of years from now, scholars and students are going to be researching it. And it's going to be part of history. We do have historical and cultural value. So I'm going to be reincarnating, looking at some of this stuff that I helped create and going, wow, that seems interesting. You know, but I won't have that fresh drama with it.
Right. Or the memory of the loss or of it being when you were young.
Like we do now with each other and the experience, because it's still so, you know, it's still fresh.
If you imagine, for example, ancient Egypt, and you imagine being, you know, a priestess of Isis in ancient Egypt, it's kind of easy to do, actually. You can you can read as much as you want and connect more and more and just go there. But there was a time when somebody was a priestess of Isis when she was young, and then somebody like the Arabs or the whoever came and burned down Alexandria that year, or you know, and then as an older woman, she missed the days when she was a priestess of Isis.
Right.
And so for her, it was 40 years ago. And it's just a phenomenon that doesn't exist anymore. But maybe to someone else that she's talking to.
It does exist. Seriously, the Library of Alexandria
right.
is the internet. You can find, it's the new library.
Yeah.
You can find anything. And I'm just like so blown away that all of this stuff that was like gold 40 years ago to even find It's like it's all
readily available to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody needs to sit before a master or guru.
Right.
It's like they need to learn to be that themselves.
Right.
But we needed it back then. I'm sorry.
It was the transitional period. Yeah.
It was we needed help.
But not every generation needed Jesus.
Exactly.
Just the one. And then, 100 years later, they had the story.
Yeah.
And not to say that Father Yod is on that same exact level necessarily, but I think the point is that Jesus would agree that every person who aspires is a person who aspires, and every soul is a soul that remains below is a soul that remains below, and we're all sparks of God, and we're all in totality the entire universe reflected like a hologram contains the whole picture within every one of its parts. It's not that we are a spark of God, it's that we literally are God as a spark.
I know, that was that exactly. Father Yod was our Jesus. He was our God because he dared to step into that. He dared to step into his godhood is what he stepped into that. He dared to step into his godhood is what he did.
Yeah.
And which we're all supposed to be doing. That's our next evolutionary process, is a spiritual being. And whether Jesus was real or not, he was the prototype for that next being, that spiritual being.
Yeah.
And we are God. And back then it was blasphemy.
Right. And still is in many circles.
And it still kind of is, even with Source family members, think that they thought that he was God or Jesus, but they were seeing it wrong. And he always said, that doesn't mean I'm the God, and it doesn't mean you're not God. There's not just one. There's not one Jesus ever.
Yeah.
But he went through his journey with it, and there was times he got confused himself, and confused is the wrong word. He went on his journey, and it was his journey. Let's just get it straight here. The Source family was Father Yod's evolutionary journey, and he said right away, right from the beginning, Edward, he says, I'm going on a journey. I don't know where it's going to take me. If you want to come along, you're welcome, and it's going to be fun. He made it very clear right from the beginning that we could witness, and that's the way I felt. I felt I witnessed his evolutionary process and his journey. And there was bends in the road. It got messy. There is a what if, could have, should have, as on any path that a person's on, any battle they're fighting. And that shouldn't be held against them.
Yeah.
At least he went to battle with it, and I think he came out much better than what he started, as far as, his spiritual evolution and process. And he left a lot for us. My God, we got to see death and birth and understand it, understand the mystery teachings, that today is like everything makes sense because of it.
Yeah.
So he gave us a lot, and he left a lot, apparently, for other people, because there are a lot of people that just relate to that whole adventure that we're sharing.
Yeah.
Relate to him, So there's something.
All over the country and probably the world, you'll find individuals, or maybe groups of 2 or 3, who have a guitar in one corner, and then in the other corner they've got, modern magic next to some tantric manual and some other things, and they kind of fantasize about, wouldn't it be cool if instead of having to go to church every Sunday, if I could go to a place where we all just rock out and then do Kabbalah and get into some Tantra and, smoke a bowl. And then they hear about the Source family, and they're like, are you serious? Someone did that? That actually happened? And so, yeah, they're drawn to it because they're already kind of part of it. And, I mean, they see that eye in the triangle, and I think part of what that does is, I mean, it makes you curious and you want to do more research, but it also takes a little bit of that spooky symbol on the back of the dollar bill. Don't you know that's the Masonic bad guys conspiracy? It kind of it makes it a little bit fun. It was much more of a, hey, look, it's the all-seeing eye, and the number 13, ooh. But we know what it means,
Symbols are symbols, which and they can be used however you want to use them. It's not that the symbol is bad, it's how they're being used.
Yeah.
And you know that I'm preaching to
certainly,
the choir.
Yeah.
But, well, good stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
There's just so much out there right now that's been elevated. We're in a whole new time frame, and the ante's been upped. The 60s and 70s was game on.
Yeah.
And now it's the ante has been upped, and I still find it very exciting. I think I've pretty well have presented. Well, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of us that have helped save the legacy. There's a lot that's still helping with it. Everybody's got their story. Everybody can tell their own story. I'm not the only one. But I feel like we have pretty well presented what we had and who he was and some of the wisdom teachings and the journey and being part of that time frame. I don't really think there's been any stone left unturned in any of it, whether it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, the man himself, godhood, the gods, the goddesses, natural birth, homeschooling, all of it. I feel pretty complete with it.
Yeah.
Myself. And now it's the only thing I don't feel complete with is now rounding out my evolutionary process and journey. Now rounding out my evolutionary process and journey. There's a lot I need to do now for myself. Just making myself a better person and correcting flaws that I've had along the way.
Right.
Because I've been so had blinders on to do what I was doing. I think it's now time for me to be my own persona.
Yeah.
And go on my full journey as myself. And that has been happening a lot over the years in meeting people and forming a whole new family structure and group. People that I'm meeting, it's like instant bonding, like with you. It was instant bonding,
Yeah.
Just soul to soul. And there was no drama. We were clear. It was so nice. But there are a lot of still gnarly threads from the past. And, I could have done a lot of stuff different. There were twists and turns, on my journey with it all too. And some of it got messy. So I think it's just time for me now to figure out how to move on with all of that and take care of my last stage of this incarnation, because I am 73.
Yeah.
So I am in the last stage of it, and just try to stay in my heart as much as possible and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, the more of that you can do, then the fresher of a start you'll be able to have on the next time around.
Right. And, the thread with that soul has never been broken. And I mean, not just this life, but apparently a lot of lifetimes, and I'm sure it will continue,
Yeah.
And, this whole thing with dimensions and timelines, I really believe we can live in different dimensions at one time, but I think they overlap. It's just too bad we can't remember more of them, if we live in parallel lifetimes or whatever.
What I was thinking was, once they start doing brain augmentation with technology and nano, technology and stuff like that, that it might trigger some kind of an ability to perceive those, sideways to those other dimensions.
Oh yeah, well we'll be encoded as we go along.
Yeah.
Locks will be opened that, are sealed for our own safety, apparently. I don't know.
thank you very much for being on the Esoterinerd podcast with me today.
Thank you, Edward. And I'll see you soon. Next time I come to LA.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Love. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Isis Aquarian, for coming on the Esoterinerd podcast tonight. Thank you to the monks at Mount Koyasan for providing the intro and outro to this podcast. Thank you to Camille and Kennedy for providing the intro and outro of the interviews in this podcast. Thank you to my wife on Atsor FSM for the Isis invocation. And most importantly, thank you, the Esoterinerd listening to this podcast. I highly recommend the movie Beyond Lemuria. It's very amusing. As one of the stars put it, it's Mystery Science Theater material.